0 to 1. This video is based on key insights from the book 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. Chapter 1, The Challenge of the Future. Peter Thiel begins by sharing a unique question he likes to ask job applicants. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? He explains this isn't a simple question. It's tough because most things taught in school are already widely accepted, and people are often afraid to share unpopular opinions. He points out that many answers he receives are actually quite common beliefs, like needing to fix the education system or opinions about religion. A truly good answer, according to Thiel, flips a popular belief on its head, stating that most people believe X, but the truth is actually the opposite. This question isn't just a quirky interview tactic. Thiel believes it's connected to understanding the future. He clarifies that the future isn't just time passing, but a time when the world will be noticeably different. If nothing changes, the future is far away. But if things change quickly, the future is right around the corner. He argues that good answers to his contrarian question reveal how people see the present, and therefore, how they anticipate the future. Thiel then introduces two kinds of progress: horizontal and vertical. Horizontal progress is like making more of something that already exists, going from one to many. Think of building 100 more typewriters. It's copying what works. Vertical progress, however, is creating something entirely new, going from 0 to 1. This is like inventing the word processor instead of just making more typewriters. It's innovation. He explains that globalization represents horizontal progress, where countries copy successful models from others, like China aiming to become like the United States. Technology, on the other hand, embodies vertical progress, representing genuinely new ways of doing things. He notes that both globalization and technology can happen at the same time, or one without the other. For example, the period between 1815 and 1914 saw both technological advancements and increased global connection. Later, there was technology without much globalization, and more recently, a lot of globalization with limited major technological breakthroughs. Thiel worries that we've become too focused on globalization, assuming other countries just need to catch up to the developed world. This leads Thiel to his own answer to the contrarian question. Most people believe the future will be shaped by globalization, but he believes technology is far more important. He argues that simply spreading existing ways of life around the world isn't sustainable. If China and India adopted the American lifestyle using today's technology, it would cause environmental disaster. New technology is needed to create wealth without destroying the planet. He points out that for most of history, progress was slow and life was hard. It wasn't until the steam engine and subsequent inventions that things really started to improve. However, he observes that progress has slowed down since the 1970s, with most improvements happening in computers and communication. Thiel emphasizes that creating this new technology is our current challenge. He believes new technology usually comes from startups small, new companies with a clear vision. He explains that big companies often struggle with innovation because of bureaucracy and a fear of risk. Startups, being smaller, can think more freely and move faster. He highlights that a startup is essentially the largest group of people you can convince to work towards building a different future. It's about challenging existing ideas and rethinking how things are done. Thiel concludes by stating that his book isn't a how-to guide, but rather an exploration of the thinking required to succeed in creating something new. Chapter 2, Party Like It's 1999. Peter Thiel begins by posing a challenging question. What important truth do most people disagree with? He suggests it's easier to find this truth by first identifying widely accepted beliefs that might actually be wrong, a kind of collective delusion. He uses the example of companies needing to make money, a seemingly obvious idea that was strangely overlooked during the late 1990s internet boom. Back then, simply having lots of users, or page views, was considered more important than actually earning a profit. This shows how easily popular beliefs can become distorted, especially during times of excitement like a bubble. Thiel then takes readers back to the 1990s, challenging the common, rosy picture we have of that decade. While it ended with the internet boom, the early and mid-90s were actually quite difficult. The U.S. experienced a recession, job losses due to globalization, and a general feeling of uncertainty. Events like the conflict in Somalia and the rise of grunge music reflected a sense of anxiety and disillusionment. Even Silicon Valley wasn't thriving. Japan was seen as the leader in technology, and the internet was still in its early stages. It wasn't until the release of user-friendly web browsers like Mosaic and Netscape that the internet really began to take off. Companies like Netscape, Yahoo, and Amazon went public with huge valuations, even without showing a profit, which raised eyebrows at the time. However, Thiel argues that the excitement wasn't entirely irrational. The world was facing economic crises in Asia and Russia, and the existing economic systems seemed to be failing. The internet offered a glimmer of hope, a potential solution to these problems. This is why investors were willing to take risks on unproven internet companies. The dot-com mania, lasting from September 1998 to March 2000, was a period of intense energy and rapid growth, but also a lot of questionable decisions. Startups threw extravagant parties, and people were willing to trade company stock for everyday purchases. It felt like anyone could get rich quickly. Thiel shares his own experience running PayPal during this time, describing how he was constantly worried that everyone else was operating on a different set of rules. He explains that PayPal's initial goal was ambitious, to create a new digital currency. Their first product, allowing money transfers between Palm Pilots, didn't gain traction. They then shifted to email payments, which worked better, but growth was slow. To attract users, they started paying people to sign up and refer friends. A costly strategy, but one they believed would pay off once they reached a large enough user base. They secured a significant investment in March 2000, just before the bubble burst, which gave them the breathing room they needed to succeed. The bursting of the dot-com bubble led to a period of skepticism and a reevaluation of what it meant to build a successful technology company. Thiel identifies 4 lessons that entrepreneurs learned from the crash. Focus on small, incremental improvements. Be lean and flexible, avoiding rigid plans. Improve on existing products rather than trying to create entirely new markets, and prioritize product development over sales and marketing. However, Thiel believes these lessons are actually misguided. He argues that it's better to be bold and ambitious, to have a plan even if it's imperfect, to seek out opportunities to create new markets, and to recognize that sales are just as important as a great product. He emphasizes that the late 1990s, despite its excesses, was a time of genuine optimism and a belief in the power of technology to solve problems. To build a better future, Thiel suggests, we need to abandon the cautious mindset that emerged after the crash and embrace a renewed sense of ambition and innovation. The most important thing, he concludes, is to think for yourself and question the conventional wisdom, even if it means going against the crowd. Chapter 3: All happy companies are different. Peter Thiel begins by posing a crucial question for anyone thinking about starting a business. What valuable thing isn't anyone else building? It's a surprisingly tricky question. Simply creating something valuable doesn't guarantee success. A company also needs to capture that value, meaning it needs to make a profit. Thiel illustrates this with the example of airlines. They provide a huge service, moving millions of people, but they barely make any money per passenger. In contrast, Google creates less obvious value, but keeps a much larger portion of the money it earns. Thiel explains this difference using economic ideas of perfect competition and monopoly. Perfect competition is what many people think is ideal, lots of companies offering the same thing, forcing prices down. However, in this situation, no one makes much money because everyone is just trying to undercut each other. It's like a crowded farmer's market where everyone sells the same tomatoes. No one can charge a high price. A monopoly, on the other hand, is when one company dominates a market. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, Thiel argues. A true monopoly isn't about being a bully, but about being so much better than the competition that there is no real competition. Think about Google in search. For a long time, it was clearly the best option, and that allowed it to thrive. Thiel points out that people often misunderstand how markets work. Companies often try to downplay their success, especially monopolies, because they don't want to attract unwanted attention from regulators or competitors. Google, for example, might emphasize how small its share of the overall advertising market is, even though it dominates search advertising. Conversely, companies in competitive markets often exaggerate their uniqueness to attract investors or customers. A new restaurant might claim to be the only one serving a specific type of cuisine, even if there are many similar options nearby. Thiel uses the example of a British restaurant in Palo Alto to illustrate this point. Saying you're the only British restaurant doesn't mean you're successful. It just means the market for British food in Palo Alto might be very small. A better question is whether people in Palo Alto actually want British food. He contrasts this with PayPal, which, at its start, was the only company offering email-based payments. That's a real difference and a real advantage. Thiel argues that competition can be brutal. Businesses in competitive markets are forced to cut costs, often by paying low wages and squeezing suppliers. This creates a ruthless environment. Monopolies, because they don't have to fight for survival every day, can afford to treat their workers better and invest in long-term projects. He even points to the tragic example of a French chef who committed suicide because of the pressure of maintaining his Michelin stars, highlighting the intense stress of a competitive industry. Thiel believes that monopoly capitalism, a system where companies strive to create monopolies, is actually a good thing. He acknowledges that monopolies can raise prices, but he argues that creative monopolies, those that offer genuinely new and better products, ultimately benefit society. He uses the example of patents, which give inventors a temporary monopoly to encourage innovation. Apple's iPhone, he says, wasn't about restricting choice, but about offering a better product that people were willing to pay for. He explains that monopolies drive progress because the potential for long-term profits encourages companies to invest in research and development. Old monopolies are eventually replaced by new, more innovative ones, preventing stagnation. Thiel contrasts this with the economic idea of equilibrium, where everything is balanced and nothing changes. He argues that progress happens far from equilibrium, when someone disrupts the status quo with a new invention or idea. Thiel concludes with a powerful analogy to Tolstoy's famous opening line in Anna Karenina. Happy families are all alike, but unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. Similarly, successful companies are all different. They each find a unique way to create a monopoly. Unsuccessful companies, however, all fail for the same reason. They couldn't escape competition. The key to building a successful startup and creating a better future is to find a problem that no one else is solving and build a company that dominates its market. Chapter 4: The Ideology of Competition. Peter Thiel believes that most people are stuck in a way of thinking that actually holds them back from creating truly amazing things. He argues that we're taught to believe competition is good, but it's really not. He thinks competition leads to everyone struggling just to survive, while creating something completely new. A creative monopoly is what actually benefits everyone and allows the creator to thrive. Think about the first smartphone. It wasn't created in a fiercely competitive market. It was a totally new idea that changed everything. That's a creative monopoly. Thiel points out that our whole education system reinforces this idea of competition. From grades that rank students against each other to the pressure to get into the best colleges, we're constantly being measured and compared. He remembers his own experience, being on a fast track from 8th grade all the way to Stanford Law School. He was successful by conventional standards, but he realized later that this path was chosen for him, not by him. He felt pressured to compete for things like a Supreme Court clerkship, which he saw as the ultimate prize. But when he didn't get it, He realized it wasn't a failure at all. It freed him to do something much more meaningful. He ended up building and selling PayPal, something he likely wouldn't have done if he'd been stuck in a traditional legal career. Thiel uses the idea of war to explain how silly our obsession with competition is. Businesses often talk about war strategies and taking market share, but he argues that competition is actually destructive, like war. He draws a parallel to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, where two families fight for reasons they don't even remember. In business, companies like Microsoft and Google spent years battling each other, copying each other's ideas, and ultimately losing ground to Apple, which offered something truly different. It's like they were so focused on fighting each other, they didn't see a bigger threat coming. He illustrates this point with the example of mobile credit card readers. When Square came out with its simple, square-shaped reader, a bunch of other companies immediately tried to copy it, but with different shapes: half-moons, cylinders, triangles. They were so focused on competing with Square that they didn't think about whether the market even needed so many different card readers. Thiel suggests that people who don't easily pick up on social cues, like those with traits similar to Asperger's syndrome, can sometimes be more successful in Silicon Valley because they're less likely to follow the crowd and more likely to pursue their own unique ideas. Thiel also points out that competition can lead companies to chase bad ideas. He uses the example of the online pet store boom in the 1990s, where dozens of companies fought for customers in a market that wasn't really there. They were so focused on beating each other that they didn't realize the whole idea was flawed. He even shares a funny story about Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, intentionally creating rivalries with other companies just to motivate his employees, even if it meant wasting time and resources. He recounts his own experience with PayPal and its competitor, XCOM. They were locked in a fierce battle until they realized a financial crash could destroy them both. They decided to merge, which ultimately allowed them to succeed. Thiel emphasizes that sometimes you need to fight, but when you do, you should aim to win decisively and quickly. He quotes Hamlet, suggesting that true greatness isn't about fighting over trivial things, but about knowing when a fight is worth having. Ultimately, Thiel believes that recognizing competition as a destructive force is the first step towards building something truly valuable and creating a better future. He suggests that focusing on creating a monopoly, offering something unique and valuable that no one else can easily copy, is the key to long-term success. Chapter 5: Last Mover Advantage. Peter Thiel begins by pointing out a surprising difference between two companies that seem similar: the New York Times and Twitter. Both have thousands of employees and deliver news to millions, yet when Twitter first offered stock to the public, it was worth much more, 12 times more, than the Times, even though the Times was actually making a profit while Twitter was losing money. This huge difference in value isn't about what's happening now, but about what investors believe will happen in the future. A great business isn't just about making money today, it's about making money for years to come. Thiel explains that the value of a business is essentially the total amount of money it will earn over its lifetime. To figure out that value accurately, you need to consider that money earned in the future is worth a little less than money you have today. He contrasts old economy businesses like newspapers, where most of the value comes from what they earn in the next few years, with technology companies. Tech companies often lose money at first because building something valuable takes time. But their real value lies in profits they expect to make 10 to 15 years down the road. He uses PayPal as an example, noting that even early on, most of its projected value came from profits expected in 2011 and beyond, even though the company was very young at the time. LinkedIn is another example, valued highly despite modest current earnings, because investors believed in its future potential. Thiel stresses that focusing only on short-term growth can be a mistake. It's easy to measure things like user numbers and quarterly profits, but those numbers don't tell the whole story. Companies like Zynga and Groupon grew quickly, but their leaders were so focused on those short-term gains that they missed important problems that threatened their long-term survival. The key question, according to Thiel, isn't just how fast a company is growing now, but whether it will still be around in a decade. To build a lasting, valuable company, Thiel argues, you need to aim for a monopoly, a position where you dominate a market. He clarifies that a monopoly isn't just about being big. It's about having a sustainable advantage that protects your profits. He identifies 4 key characteristics of companies that can achieve this: proprietary technology, network effects, economies of scale, and branding. These aren't just boxes to check, but areas to focus on to make your business durable. Proprietary technology means having something unique that competitors can't easily copy. Google's search algorithms are a prime example. They're significantly better than anything else available. Thiel suggests that to truly gain an advantage, your technology needs to be at least 10 times better than the competition. He points to examples like inventing something completely new, a cure for baldness, or radically improving an existing solution. PayPal making online payments much faster and safer. Amazon's initial success came from offering a vastly larger selection of books than any physical bookstore. Network effects occur when a product becomes more valuable as more people use it. Facebook is a classic example. It's more useful if all your friends are on it. However, Thiel cautions that network effects only work if your product is valuable to the very first users. He uses the example of Xanadu, a project to create a global network that failed because it needed everyone to join at once. Successful network businesses, like Facebook, start small, focusing on a specific group of people. Economies of scale mean that as a company grows, its costs decrease, allowing it to become even more competitive. Software companies benefit greatly from this because the cost of creating another copy of their software is almost zero. Thiel notes that some businesses, like yoga studios, don't benefit much from scale. A good startup should be designed to take advantage of economies of scale from the beginning. Finally, branding can create a monopoly by giving a company a unique identity and loyal customers. Apple is a strong example, with its sleek design, high-quality products, and strong brand image. However, Thiel warns against focusing on branding before building a great product. He criticizes Yahoo for trying to become cool without first creating something truly innovative. Thiel emphasizes the importance of starting small and dominating a niche market before expanding. He advises entrepreneurs to avoid trying to disrupt established industries and instead focus on creating something new. He uses the example of PayPal, which didn't try to directly compete with Visa, but instead created a new way to pay for things online. Ultimately, Thiel argues that the key to building a successful startup isn't about being first, but about being last, making the last great development in a specific market and enjoying years of monopoly profits. He compares it to chess, where understanding the endgame is crucial for success. Chapter 6: You are not a lottery ticket. Peter Thiel begins by tackling a big question: is success about luck or hard work? Many successful people, like the author of Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell, and billionaire investor Warren Buffett, admit luck plays a big role. They feel fortunate for the opportunities they had. Even Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, jokes that his success was partly luck and good timing. However, Thiel points out that this doesn't explain why some people start multiple successful companies. If success was just about luck, you wouldn't see the same people succeeding again and again. Thiel recalls a tweet from Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter and Square, who said success is never accidental. But many people disagreed with him, especially online, suggesting that successful people just have advantages others don't. Thiel acknowledges that being successful already makes it easier to succeed again, but he argues we shouldn't dismiss the idea that people can plan their way to success. It's a tricky debate because it's impossible to run a true experiment on companies. You can't create 2 identical worlds to see which Facebook would succeed. Every company starts in a unique situation, making it hard to draw clear conclusions. The author then looks back at how people used to view luck. In the past, people believed you could make your own luck through hard work and preparation. They focused on what they could control, not what was random. He quotes Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said strong people believe in cause and effect, meaning actions have consequences. This contrasts with today's tendency to see life as a matter of chance. Thiel asks a crucial question. If you believe everything is random, why bother learning about startups at all? It's like trying to win the lottery knowing strategies won't guarantee a win. Thiel emphasizes the importance of having a definite view of the future. You can either believe the future is predictable and work to shape it, or believe it's random and give up trying to control it. He argues that our current society is stuck in a pattern of indefinite thinking. Instead of having clear plans, people collect experiences and qualifications just in case. Students fill their resumes with lots of activities, hoping to be prepared for anything, but ultimately being prepared for nothing specific. He contrasts this with a definite person who focuses on becoming truly excellent at one thing. Thiel outlines 4 possible attitudes toward the future: indefinite pessimism, definite pessimism, definite optimism, and indefinite optimism. Indefinite pessimists believe things will get worse, but don't know what to do about it, like Europe today. Definite pessimists believe things will get worse but plan for it, like China, which is focused on avoiding disaster. Definite optimists believe they can make the future better through planning and hard work, like the inventors and builders of the past. And indefinite optimists believe the future will be better, but don't have a specific plan, like many people in finance who rearrange existing things instead of creating new ones. Thiel argues that indefinite optimism is unsustainable. If no one is actively planning for a better future, how can it actually get better? He uses the example of biology, where scientists often rely on random experimentation, and compares it to the approach of many startups. He believes that just like Steve Jobs, successful entrepreneurs are designers who create a clear vision and execute a plan. He points out that it's easier to value a company with a strong plan because its potential is clearer. Ultimately, Thiel calls for a cultural revolution to shift away from indefinite thinking and embrace a definite view of the future. He believes that starting a company is one of the best ways to take control and create something new. He concludes with a powerful message: you are not a lottery ticket. You have the power to shape your own destiny through planning, hard work, and a clear vision. Chapter 7: Follow the Money. Peter Thiel begins by pointing out a simple truth: success isn't evenly spread out. He uses a quote often attributed to Albert Einstein about compound interest, highlighting how small beginnings can lead to huge results. Even though it's likely Einstein never actually said those words, the idea stuck around, showing how powerful a good idea can be, even if its origins are unclear. Thiel explains that most things are forgotten, but a few people and ideas like Einstein and Shakespeare are constantly remembered and used. This isn't random. It's a pattern where a small number of things achieve a lot of success. Thiel introduces the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule. This idea, discovered by economist Vilfredo Pareto, shows up everywhere. It means that roughly 20% of something creates 80% of the results. Think about a garden: 20% of the plants might produce 80% of the peas. Or consider earthquakes. A few big ones release way more energy than all the smaller ones combined. This uneven distribution is called a power law, and Thiel argues it's a fundamental rule of the universe. We often don't notice it because it's so common. The chapter focuses on how this power law works in the world of venture capital, where investors fund new companies. Venture capitalists try to find companies that will grow quickly and become very valuable. They pool money from different sources and invest in startups, hoping to make a profit when those companies either become public or are bought by larger companies. However, most startups fail, and most venture capital funds don't make much money. Thiel emphasizes that even experienced investors often underestimate just how different companies can be. The mistake, according to Thiel, is assuming that success will be evenly distributed. Investors often think that some companies will do well, some will do okay, and some will fail. They spread their money around, hoping the winners will cover the losses. But this spray and pray approach usually doesn't work. Thiel argues that venture capital returns follow a power law. A very small number of companies generate most of the profits. If you try to diversify too much, you'll miss out on those rare, incredibly successful companies. Thiel uses the example of Founders Fund, his own venture capital firm. He explains that Facebook, one of their investments, returned more money than all their other investments combined. Another company, Palantir, is on track to do the same. This isn't unusual. It's a pattern they see in all their funds. The biggest secret in venture capital, Thiel says, is that the best investment in a successful fund often equals or exceeds the returns of all the other investments combined. This leads to two important rules for venture capitalists. First, they should only invest in companies that have the potential to become incredibly valuable companies that could return the entire value of the fund. This is a risky rule because it means saying no to most companies. Second, because the first rule is so strict, there shouldn't be many other rules. Thiel illustrates this with the example of Andreessen Horowitz's investment in Instagram. While a 312x return was great, it wasn't enough to significantly impact their large fund. They needed to find many more Instagrams to break even, which is why investors usually put more money into companies they believe in. Thiel stresses that venture capitalists need to focus on finding the few companies that can truly dominate their markets and then support them fully. While they need a portfolio, every company in that portfolio must have the potential for massive scale. He compares spreading investments too thin to buying lottery tickets. You're more likely to lose than win. Thiel then asks why venture capitalists, who work with rapidly growing companies, often miss the power law. He explains that it takes time for the power law to become clear. In the early stages, companies look similar, and it's hard to predict which ones will succeed. But after 10 years, the results are usually obvious. One company will dominate, and the others will lag behind. He also points out that investors spend most of their time working with average companies, not the exceptional ones, and often devote more attention to struggling companies than to those that are already doing well. Thiel argues that the power law isn't just relevant to investors, it applies to everyone. Everyone makes investments in their future, whether it's choosing a career or starting a business. He criticizes the common advice to diversify, to spread your efforts across many options. While diversification might seem safe, Thiel believes it's often a mistake. You can't run dozens of companies at once, and you can't have dozens of equally promising careers in reserve. He criticizes the education system for promoting a generic, diversified approach to learning. Schools often treat all subjects and students the same, discouraging focus and specialization. Thiel believes that people should focus relentlessly on what they're good at and what has the potential to be valuable in the future. He suggests that many people should consider joining a successful, growing company rather than starting their own, as the differences between companies are far greater than the differences between roles within those companies. Finally, Thiel emphasizes the importance of thinking about the power law when making decisions. It's not always obvious what will succeed, but it's crucial to consider where your actions will fall on the curve of success. He encourages readers to think hard about whether their efforts will lead to exponential growth or simply average results. Chapter 8, Secrets. Peter Thiel begins by pointing out something really important. Every big idea we have today was once brand new and unknown. Think about how long it took to figure out simple math, like the rules for triangles. It wasn't easy. People had to really think about it, and even joined special groups to learn the new ideas. Now, that math is basic stuff we teach in elementary school. Knowing what everyone else knows is good, but it won't help you stand out. It's not a secret. Thiel asks a key question for anyone wanting to build something amazing. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? He explains that this question only makes sense if there are still things left to discover in the world. If everything was already figured out, there would be no point in trying to find new truths. He makes a distinction between things we don't understand and things that might be impossible to understand. For example, string theory in physics is super complicated and hard to test. Is it just difficult, or is it something we can never figure out? Knowing the difference is important because you can achieve difficult things, but not the impossible. This idea connects directly to building a successful company. Thiel argues that a valuable company is built on a secret, something important that few people know. If lots of people already knew about it, someone would have already built that company. He believes there are still many world-changing companies waiting to be started, but you have to be willing to look for those hidden opportunities. Thiel then introduces a surprising figure, the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. While Kaczynski's actions were terrible, Thiel finds his ideas interesting. Kaczynski believed that modern people are unhappy because all the hard problems have been solved. What's left are either too easy or impossible, leaving people feeling unfulfilled. Thiel uses this as an example of how many people have lost faith in the idea that we can still make big discoveries. He compares this mindset to hipsters who try to recreate the past, or to fundamentalists who believe all the important truths are already known. He points out that we live in a world where it feels like all the physical frontiers have been explored. There are no more blank spaces on the map. But he argues that 4 trends have also contributed to this belief that there are no secrets left. Learning in small steps, being afraid to take risks, being too comfortable with the status quo, and the idea that the world is a very competitive place where someone else has probably already thought of your idea. Thiel suggests that these trends have made us lose our sense of wonder and our willingness to search for new things. Thiel then describes what the world looks like to people who don't believe in secrets. He argues that they believe all the big questions have already been answered. In this view, justice is perfect, markets are always right, and companies should just focus on doing things properly, not on inventing new things. He uses the example of Hewlett-Packard, a company that was once very innovative but lost its way when it stopped looking for secrets and started focusing on things like accounting and following rules. Thiel emphasizes that believing in secrets is essential for progress. He points to Andrew Wiles, the mathematician who finally proved Fermat's last theorem after centuries of failed attempts. Wiles succeeded because he believed it was possible, even when others had given up. Thiel believes we can still make huge breakthroughs in science, medicine, and technology, but only if we are willing to search for those secrets. He uses the examples of Airbnb and Uber to show how companies can succeed by finding hidden opportunities and connecting people in new ways. Finally, Thiel offers advice on how to find secrets. He suggests looking in fields that haven't been fully explored or standardized, like nutrition. He also points out that secrets about people, what they don't know about themselves or what they hide, can be just as valuable as secrets about nature. He cautions against sharing your secrets with everyone, but suggests building a company around them, creating a group of people who are all working towards the same goal. He ends with a hopeful message, encouraging readers to take the hidden paths and explore the unknown. Chapter 9, Foundations. Peter Thiel believes that starting a company is a lot like building a country. The very beginning is the most important part, and mistakes made early on are incredibly hard to fix later. He even jokes that friends call this Thiel's Law because a shaky start can doom a business. He points to the universe itself and the United States as examples. Both had crucial moments at their founding, where decisions shaped everything that followed. The early universe expanded rapidly, and the laws of physics were different then. When the U.S. was created, the Founding Fathers debated important things like how much power the government should have, and those decisions are still affecting us today, even though the Constitution hasn't changed much since the Bill of Rights was added. Thiel stresses that as a founder, your first job is to get the foundational elements right. Bad early choices, like picking the wrong business partner or hiring the wrong people, can be incredibly difficult to correct, sometimes only fixable during a major crisis like bankruptcy. He uses his own experience with PayPal as an example. He still works with one of his co-founders, Luke Nosek, But before PayPal, Luke invested in a company with someone he didn't really know. They met briefly and decided to start a business together, which Thiel compares to getting married to someone you just met at a casino. It might work out, but it's a big risk. That company failed, and Thiel lost money. Now, when he considers investing, he looks closely at the founding team, not just their skills, but how well they get along and how well they've worked together before. He believes founders should have a history together before starting a company, rather than just hoping for the best. Thiel explains that it's not just about founders getting along, but about everyone in the company working well together. He acknowledges that some people might think you can avoid problems by being a sole proprietor, running the business entirely by yourself. While that guarantees you'll agree with yourself, it limits how big your company can become. Others might suggest hiring only perfect people who will work together harmoniously, without any rules. But Thiel argues that people aren't perfect, and you need structure, like a board of directors, to keep everyone aligned. He breaks down 3 important concepts: ownership, who legally owns the company; possession, who runs the day-to-day operations; and control, who governs the company. Ideally, these work together, with ownership providing financial incentive, possession empowering people to get things done, and control providing oversight. To illustrate how things can go wrong, Thiel uses the example of the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles. We, the people, supposedly own the DMV, but it often feels like the clerks have all the power. They can make getting a driver's license easy or frustrating, and even the governor has trouble changing things. He also points out that CEOs of large companies often don't own a significant portion of the company, which can lead them to focus on short-term gains to boost their own paychecks rather than long-term value for everyone. In startups, founders usually have both ownership and possession, but conflicts often arise between founders and investors who have control. Thiel advises keeping the board of directors small 3 people is ideal, because a small board can be more effective at overseeing the company. A large board, he says, often doesn't do much at all. Thiel emphasizes the importance of full commitment from everyone involved. He believes that anyone working with your company should be fully invested, either through stock options or a regular salary. Consultants or part-time employees are often misaligned because they're more focused on short-term gains. He uses the phrase "on the bus" or "off the bus," inspired by Ken Kesey, to illustrate that you need everyone fully committed to the journey. He also argues that CEOs shouldn't pay themselves too much, no more than $150,000 a year, because high pay can make them act like politicians protecting their own interests instead of founders focused on growing the company. A CEO who takes a lower salary sets a good example for everyone else. Thiel believes that equity or part ownership is a better incentive than cash. Cash is immediate and offers flexibility, but equity aligns people's interests with the long-term success of the company. However, he cautions that equity needs to be distributed carefully. Giving everyone equal shares can be unfair, and it's best to keep the details of equity distribution secret to avoid resentment. Most people don't even want equity, preferring the security of a paycheck, but those who do are showing a commitment to the future. Finally, Thiel concludes that the founding of a company isn't just a single moment, but a period of continuous creation. A company remains in its founding phase as long as it's inventing and growing, and that phase ends when it stops creating new things. A successful company can extend its founding indefinitely by continuing to innovate. Chapter 10, The Mechanics of Mafia. Peter Thiel begins by asking us to imagine the perfect company. Many people dream of a workplace filled with fun perks like comfy chairs, free food, and even massages. But Thiel points out that these things don't actually make a company successful. He believes that a strong company culture isn't about fancy decorations or policies. It's about the people and what they're working towards together. He argues that a company is its culture, not that it has a culture. Think of it like a sports team. It's not just about the equipment, it's about the players working together towards a common goal. Thiel shares the story of the PayPal Mafia, a group of people who worked at PayPal and went on to create other successful companies like YouTube, LinkedIn, and Tesla. This wasn't just luck. He explains that they didn't just hire the smartest people, they focused on building strong relationships. He contrasts this with his experience at a law firm where people worked together all day, but didn't really connect outside of work. Thiel believes that spending your time with people you don't enjoy being around is a waste, even if it means making money. He emphasizes that building lasting relationships at work is a valuable investment in your future. The author stresses that recruiting the right people is incredibly important. It's not enough to just look at resumes. Companies need to find people who are excited about the mission and eager to work specifically with the team. He asks a crucial question: why would someone choose to work at your company, especially when they have other options like working at a well-known place like Google? He says that typical answers like stock options or smart colleagues aren't enough because everyone says that. To attract the best people, a company needs to offer something unique. Thiel suggests focusing on two things: a compelling mission and a great team. The mission should be something important that only your company can achieve. For example, at PayPal, they were trying to create a new form of money. The team aspect means being able to explain why someone would personally enjoy working with the people at your company. He warns against getting caught up in a perk war, offering things like free laundry just to attract employees. Instead, focus on offering meaningful work and a strong team. Thiel then discusses the importance of creating a sense of unity within a company. He observes that people in Silicon Valley often wear company-branded clothing, which shows they're part of a tribe with a shared purpose. He suggests that early employees should be similar in their thinking and values, as this makes it easier to work quickly and efficiently. He uses the example of the early PayPal team, who all shared a love for science fiction and a belief in a new kind of currency. However, Thiel also emphasizes the importance of individual contributions. He believes that the best way to manage a startup is to assign each person one specific responsibility and let them excel at it. This reduces competition and conflict, allowing people to build stronger relationships. He compares a highly dedicated company to a cult, but points out that successful startups are fanatically right about something, while cults are usually fanatically wrong. He concludes that it's better to be seen as a bit extreme than to be bland and indistinguishable, like a typical consulting firm. Chapter 11, If You Build It, Will They Come? Peter Thiel begins by pointing out something surprising. Even though selling is everywhere, people, especially in tech hubs like Silicon Valley, don't fully appreciate how important it is. He playfully references the science fiction series The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where salespeople are seen as useless and are even sent away on a doomed spaceship. This story highlights a common belief that a great product should automatically find its customers, like in the movie Field of Dreams where they say, "If you build it, they will come." Thiel argues this is simply not true. Building something amazing is only half the battle. You absolutely must have a plan to get it into the hands of people who will actually use it. Thiel emphasizes that distribution, everything involved in selling a product, is often underestimated. People tend to think salespeople are annoying middlemen who get in the way of a natural connection between a product and its users. However, he points out the sheer size of the sales and advertising industries, hundreds of billions of dollars and millions of jobs. Engineers, in particular, often struggle to understand why so many people are needed in sales, because they believe in the power of a truly great product. But Thiel explains that advertising isn't about instantly making someone buy something. It's about creating a lasting impression that influences future decisions. He suggests that even those who think they're immune to advertising are likely being subtly affected by it. The author contrasts the world of engineering, where things either work or they don't, with the world of sales, which is about changing how people perceive things. Engineers value transparency and clear results, while sales often involves persuasion and creating a certain image. Thiel notes that good salespeople appear to have an easy job, but that's because they've worked hard to make it look that way. He uses the example of Tom Sawyer convincing his friends to whitewash a fence, not just for free, but for payment, a masterclass in salesmanship. He points out that sales professionals often hide their skills by using job titles that don't immediately scream salesperson, like account executive or business development manager, because people don't want to feel like they're being sold to. Thiel argues that sales ability is what separates successful people from those who just get by in almost any field. On Wall Street, lawyers, and even in academia, those who excel are often the ones who are best at persuading others. He stresses that the idea of a product selling itself is usually a myth. Even if a product is amazing and fits perfectly into people's lives, it still needs a strong distribution plan. He uses the concept of path dependence, the idea that historical circumstances can influence which products succeed, but argues that this doesn't mean success is random. Distribution should be a core part of the product's design from the beginning. Thiel explains that a strong distribution strategy can even create a monopoly, even if the product isn't necessarily better than the competition. He introduces two key metrics: customer lifetime value, CLV, how much money a customer spends with you over their entire relationship with your company, and customer acquisition cost, CAC, how much it costs to get a new customer. To be successful, your CLV must be higher than your CAC. He then breaks down different sales approaches, starting with complex sales, which involve large deals that require a lot of personal attention, like SpaceX selling rockets to NASA. He notes that in these situations, it's often best if the CEO handles the sales directly. He uses Palantir, a company he co-founded, as an example. The author then discusses personal sales, where smaller deals are made through a sales team, like Box initially gaining customers by focusing on small groups of users with specific needs. He warns against trying to be everything to everyone and emphasizes the importance of starting small and building a base of satisfied customers. He also addresses the distribution doldrums, where a product's price point makes it difficult to reach customers through traditional advertising or a dedicated sales force. He uses the example of software for convenience stores. He then moves on to marketing and advertising, which work best for low-priced products with mass appeal, like Procter & Gamble's laundry detergent. He cautions startups against trying to compete with larger companies in advertising, and shares a humorous anecdote about a failed marketing campaign at PayPal involving James Doohan from Star Trek. Thiel concludes by highlighting the power of viral marketing, where a product's core functionality encourages users to invite others, like Facebook and PayPal did. He emphasizes the importance of finding the right market segment to target first, using PayPal's focus on eBay power sellers as an example. He stresses that distribution follows a power law, meaning that one channel will likely be far more effective than all others. Finally, Thiel points out that everyone is a salesperson in some way, whether they're selling a product, themselves, or their company. He encourages readers to recognize the importance of sales and to actively work on developing their own sales skills. Chapter 12, Man and Machine. Peter Thiel begins by observing that many old industries aren't changing much, but technology, especially information technology, is moving incredibly fast. Today, billions of people have amazing amounts of knowledge right in their pockets with smartphones. These phones are way more powerful than the computers that sent people to the moon. And if things keep going as they have been, computers will only get even faster. Thiel points out that computers are already better than people at some things we used to think only humans could do. He mentions how IBM's Deep Blue beat chess champion Garry Kasparov, and how IBM's Watson beat the best Jeopardy! Player Ken Jennings. Even self-driving cars are being tested on roads. While these cars might not threaten race car drivers like Dale Earnhardt Jr., they could take jobs away from millions of drivers, like taxi and truck drivers. This leads some people to wonder if there will be any jobs left for humans in the future. Some people, like venture capitalist Mark Andreessen, believe that computers are taking over everything. Others, like Andy Kessler, even seem happy about the idea of replacing people with technology to make things more efficient. However, Thiel argues that this idea, that computers will simply replace humans, is wrong. He believes computers are better seen as tools that help people, not replace them. He thinks the most successful businesses in the future will be those that empower people with technology, rather than trying to make people unnecessary. To explain this, Thiel contrasts the idea of substitution with complementarity. He explains that 15 years ago, people worried about losing jobs to cheaper workers in Mexico. This made sense because people can do each other's jobs. Now, people worry about losing jobs to computers. But this is different. People compete with each other for jobs and resources, but computers don't compete in the same way. He uses the example of free trade, explaining that it works best when people specialize in what they're good at and trade with each other. However, this can lead to problems when there's a huge difference in how much people are willing to work for. Thiel then explains that computers are fundamentally different from people. People are good at making plans and decisions in complicated situations, while computers are great at processing lots of data quickly. He uses the example of Google's computer that learned to identify cats in YouTube videos. While the computer could identify cats with 75% accuracy, a 4-year-old can do it perfectly. This shows that humans and computers are good at very different things. Because of these differences, working with computers can be much more valuable than simply trading with other people. Computers are tools, like a hammer or a lamp, not rivals. He further explains that unlike people, computers don't want more luxurious things. They just need electricity. This means that when we create new technology, we get all the benefits of working with a specialist without having to compete for resources. Technology, therefore, can help us avoid competition in a globalized world. As computers get more powerful, they won't replace us, they'll help us. Thiel shares his own experience at PayPal to illustrate this point. When PayPal was new, they lost millions of dollars each month to credit card fraud. They tried to use software to automatically detect and stop the fraud, but the fraudsters quickly learned how to trick the software. They realized that humans were better at spotting the fraud, so they created a system where computers flagged suspicious transactions and human analysts made the final decision. This system, called Igor, helped PayPal become profitable. He emphasizes that this man-machine partnership was essential to PayPal's success. This experience led Thiel to co-found Palantir, a company that uses a similar approach to help people analyze information and solve complex problems, like identifying terrorist networks and detecting financial fraud. He explains that neither humans nor computers can do these things effectively on their own. The CIA relies on human intelligence, while the NSA relies on computers. Palantir combines the strengths of both, allowing analysts to review data flagged by computers. Palantir has also been used to predict where insurgents plant bombs, prosecute insider trading, and even track disease outbreaks. Thiel argues that professionals in fields like law, medicine, and education will also benefit from technology. Technology won't replace lawyers, doctors, or teachers, but it will allow them to do their jobs even better. He uses LinkedIn as an example, explaining that it didn't try to replace recruiters, but instead transformed how they did their jobs. Thiel believes that many people miss the power of this partnership because of how they are trained. Computer scientists are often focused on automating tasks and replacing human effort. He criticizes the current focus on machine learning and big data, arguing that these approaches often prioritize quantity over quality and ignore the importance of human judgment. He believes we should focus on how computers can help humans solve problems, rather than trying to create computers that can solve problems on their own. Finally, Thiel acknowledges that the future of computing is uncertain. He cautions against fears of strong AI computers that are smarter than humans, but argues that these fears are premature. He believes that we should focus on building a better future with the technology we have today, by embracing the complementary relationship between humans and computers. He concludes that ever smarter computers will be our friends, not our foes, if we use them to help us solve hard problems. Chapter 13, Seeing Green. At the start of the 2000s, everyone thought clean technology, or clean tech, was the next big thing. Cities like Beijing were covered in smog, making it hard to breathe, and places like Bangladesh faced huge health problems from polluted water. Even in the United States, big storms like Hurricanes Ivan and Katrina seemed to show the dangers of a changing climate. People wanted to fix these problems, so many new companies started, and investors put over $50 billion into them, hoping to cleanse the world. But it didn't work out as planned. Instead of a healthier planet, there was a bubble lots of companies failed. Solyndra, a solar company, became famous for going bankrupt, but many others met the same fate. Peter Thiel explains that the problem wasn't just that governments didn't support these companies enough. It was more complicated than that. Most clean tech companies failed because they didn't answer some basic questions that every successful business needs to consider. Thiel lists 7 questions. First, can you create something truly new and much better, not just a small improvement? Imagine trying to sell a slightly faster bicycle. People might not bother switching. But a flying bicycle? That's a game changer. Second, is this the right time to start this business? Sometimes, even a great idea is too early for the world. It's like trying to sell smartphones before cell phones even existed. Third, can you dominate a small market? It's better to be the biggest fish in a small pond than a tiny fish in a huge ocean. Fourth, do you have the right team? You need people with the skills and experience to make your idea a reality. Fifth, can you actually get your product to customers? Building something is one thing, but selling and delivering it is just as important. Sixth, will your business still be successful in 10 or 20 years? You need to think about the future and how your business will adapt. Finally, do you have a unique idea that others haven't thought of? Thiel points out that many clean tech companies failed the first test, creating truly breakthrough technology. For example, Solyndra made cylindrical solar cells, which turned out to be less efficient than traditional flat ones. They tried to fix this with mirrors, but it was hard to overcome such a basic flaw. He emphasizes that improvements need to be significant, at least 10 times better, to really make a difference. A 20% improvement might sound good, but it often doesn't outweigh the costs and risks of a new product. Timing was also a big issue. Some companies thought the time was right for clean energy, but they were wrong. Thiel uses the example of a company CEO who compared the solar industry to the early days of microprocessors. But unlike microprocessors, which improved rapidly, solar technology had been improving slowly for decades. Entering a slow-moving market requires a clear plan for taking over, which these companies lacked. Another mistake was thinking that the huge energy market could support many companies. Thiel notes that investor John Doerr said the energy market was in the trillions of dollars, but that also meant fierce competition. Companies often overestimated their uniqueness. A solar company might install enough panels to power 10% of homes in the US, but that's only a tiny fraction of the global energy market. It's important to be realistic about your market share. Thiel also observes that many clean tech companies were run by people who were good at raising money, but lacked technical expertise. He jokingly says that the executives wore suits and ties, while real tech people wear t-shirts and jeans. He even created a rule at his investment firm to avoid companies whose founders dressed up for meetings. Getting the product to customers was another challenge. He uses the example of Better Place, an Israeli company that tried to sell electric cars with swappable batteries. The process of buying and using the cars was so complicated that most people didn't bother. They focused too much on the technology and not enough on making it easy for customers. Looking ahead, Thiel argues that clean tech companies often failed to consider how the market would change. They didn't anticipate competition from China or the rise of fracking, a new way to get natural gas. Fracking made natural gas cheaper and more abundant, which hurt the business case for many renewable energy projects. Finally, Thiel says that many clean tech companies lacked a unique insight. They all believed in the general idea of clean energy, but they didn't have a specific reason for success that others didn't see. He contrasts this with Tesla, which understood that people wanted electric cars that were also stylish and cool. Thiel concludes that the clean tech bubble wasn't a sign that clean energy was a bad idea. It was a sign that many companies didn't understand how to build a successful business. He believes that the need for new energy sources is still real, but future entrepreneurs need to focus on finding small markets and dominating them, just like Tesla did. He suggests looking for overlooked problems and creating unique solutions, rather than simply following the crowd. Chapter 14, The Founder's Paradox. Peter Thiel begins by sharing a surprising fact about the founders of PayPal. Many of them had built bombs as teenagers. This isn't meant to suggest that building explosives is a good qualification for starting a company, but rather to illustrate that successful founders often have unusual backgrounds and traits. He points out that these individuals were young, many were immigrants, and they all possessed a certain rebellious streak. Even the one founder who seemed normal, an Eagle Scout, was considered odd by his peers for choosing a startup over a secure job at a bank. Thiel asks a big question: are all founders naturally different, or do we just remember the quirky details? More importantly, what qualities really matter when building a successful company? Thiel explains that most people fall somewhere in the middle when it comes to traits like intelligence or strength, forming a bell curve. However, founders often seem to have extreme qualities, suggesting their traits might be plotted differently, with more people at the high and low ends. But it's more complex than that. Founders often embody contradictory traits, being both wealthy and broke, charismatic and difficult. They are both insiders and outsiders, gaining fame and facing criticism simultaneously. Thiel visualizes this as an inverse normal distribution, meaning they deviate significantly from the average. The author wonders where these unusual combinations come from. Are they born with these traits, or do they develop them through life experiences? It's also possible that founders intentionally exaggerate certain qualities, or that others exaggerate them. All these factors work together, creating a cycle where unusual people become even more perceived as unusual. Thiel uses Sir Richard Branson as an example. Branson started young, but his public image, the long hair, the adventurous stunts, seems carefully cultivated. The media then amplifies these traits, creating a larger-than-life persona. Is Branson a natural entrepreneur, a branding genius, or a product of good PR? Thiel suggests it might be a combination of all three. Thiel then introduces Sean Parker, the founder of Napster and early president of Facebook, as another example. Parker's background included a criminal record as a teenager, which initially made him an outsider. However, he went on to achieve great success, only to face setbacks and controversy. Despite these challenges, he became a cultural icon, partly due to his portrayal in the movie The Social Network. This illustrates how even negative publicity can contribute to a founder's mystique. Thiel extends this idea to celebrities like Lady Gaga, who create elaborate personas that seem far removed from their real selves. Are they authentic, or are they carefully constructed myths? Thiel then looks back at history, drawing parallels between modern founders and figures from mythology like Oedipus and Romulus. These figures were often both heroic and flawed, insiders and outsiders. He argues that ancient cultures remembered these extraordinary individuals because they served a crucial purpose. They acted as scapegoats, absorbing blame during times of crisis and maintaining social order. This connects to the idea that founders, like kings, often bear a heavy burden of responsibility and are subject to intense scrutiny. The author then turns to examples of American royalty, celebrities, and tech founders who have experienced both immense success and dramatic falls from grace. Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, and Britney Spears all achieved superstardom, but their lives were also marked by tragedy and scandal. Similarly, Howard Hughes, a pioneering aviator and filmmaker, descended into obsessive-compulsive behavior and isolation. Thiel uses Bill Gates as an example of a founder who faced legal challenges and public criticism, and Steve Jobs as a founder who returned to his company and led it to unprecedented success. Thiel emphasizes that a founder's unique vision and leadership are often irreplaceable. He argues that companies that create new technology often resemble feudal monarchies, with a strong leader making authoritative decisions. However, he cautions against founders becoming too enamored with their own myths. The greatest danger is losing touch with reality and believing in one's own infallibility. He concludes that while founders are essential for innovation, they should remember that their success depends on the contributions of everyone in the company. A great founder doesn't work in isolation. They inspire and empower others to achieve their best. And that brings us to the end of our summary of this book. I hope you found it insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching.